Hello everyone. Our Unsung series continues with Luke Benuska, the Packers college scout in the Southeast region. Luke, first of all, that's got to be a huge responsibility. All the players that come out of that area, huge responsibility?
I think there's kind of multiple schools of thought. I mean, obviously, players come from everywhere, right? So every area, we have to have coverage, and we got to make sure we're getting these guys figured out. But definitely, you're right. I mean, if you look at the numbers, especially a couple different positions, there's a lot of players coming out of those schools. I mean, you see with our team in Georgia and all that stuff. So no, it's definitely something I don't take lightly. But also want to say that obviously there's football players all over the country.
You played tackle at TCU, and you're working, after that, you're working in the recruiting office. Talk about your path to the personnel department of the Green Bay Packers. How did that come about?
Yeah. First of all, I want to put played as the operative word there. I was more of a...
You're a letter guy.
Yeah. No, I played on special teams. It was a backup and whatnot. I got to play a little bit, but I mean, even going back further from that, I was a walk-on at TCU, walk-on tight end, and kind of over time, put some weight on, actually kind of developed a little bit, and then, like I said, obviously was lucky enough to play for a few years and contribute, and kind of always knew that this is what I wanted to do, and wasn't shy with telling people at that time, really kind of mainly just kind of coaches and stuff at TCU, this is what I would want to do, and over time, if this, Coach X had a friend coming in that, Scout Y coming in, he would hit me up and be like, hey, come through early in the morning and just say hello, to this guy or that guy. And that way I got to start meeting scouts. And one of those interactions was Coach Patterson actually at the end of my time said, I got a couple guys that I really respect in this business. And one of the names he said was Alonzo Highsmith. So then in kind of those months following, which, like you said, I was volunteering and helping out, just kind of in the recruiting department, I met Alonzo and kind of kept in contact with him. And through Alonzo, he brought me up to interview for the 6 weeks training camp scouting internship that we do. So interviewed for that, got that, and didn't let me leave after that. So.
And the rest is history.
Yes.
Why personnel and not coaching? A lot of guys that like football and they're not going to play afterwards, they kind of get into coaching. Why personnel?
Yeah, and during that period of time when I was helping out at TCU, I kind of had to think about that. But I definitely think their lifestyle would be the first thing that you would say, especially at that point in time, all I had seen is college, right? And college coaches' lifestyle is very, with the recruiting and everything, it's very, very time consuming. I also think like the call to coach, I think a lot of it kind of comes from the want to teach. I don't think that I would be unable to teach, but I just think I enjoyed more of the sitting back and kind of, I think scouting is more of a background thing. Like you're kind of just like a fly on the wall, evaluating what's going on, what makes these guys tick. Because like I said earlier, being a walk-on and being kind of one of the guys in the locker room, I think one of the things that I was fascinated with was like watching the Jason Verrett's of the world, watching the just the guys that were going through that would get that chance in the NFL. Like what made them different from me or from one of my other teammates, and that just kind of always made me kind of scratch that itch. So I just think that was what kind of intrigued me about it.
The part about walking on, does that always leave you with a soft spot in your heart for the try-hard guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I would definitely say I'm more, been trained by Goody and all these guys. I'm definitely a height, weight, speed, traits guy, so I definitely like my traits. But no, I appreciate when someone, we talk all the time about adversity. And I think whenever you get the story of someone that was a walk-on or someone that had to maybe overcome something from a talent deficiency or whatever, I think it speaks volumes about them. And we have found that people that have overcome adversity, end up working out more times than not.
This always has fascinated me. I'm sure when you got out and started doing it, you felt pretty good about offensive line. You say you played some tight end, but you played tackle at TCU. I'm sure you felt comfortable evaluating those positions from the get-go. But how long does it take you to get comfortable with the other spots?
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of always like to think of it as depth of knowledge, like breadth of knowledge, like if you sat down and you talked to, yourself who played the position at a high level, or a position coach that's sitting there and teaching it day in and day out, they're going to be able to tell you a lot more about one particular position. I think you just have to be intentional about it and understand, like, coming in as a 22-year-old guy in the profession, like, I need to learn more about defensive back, or I need to learn more about inside linebacker, get more of a baseline understanding of, like, what are their responsibilities on a snap in, snap out basis, and then you can do a better job of just kind of understanding whether or not they're playing to par, above par, or below par. And a lot of it, it's just time on task. I mean, it's kind of like building your catalog of, like, different players and who worked out, who didn't, and then you can kind of make comparisons and baseline it.
An eye for talent, is that something that can be learned or acquired, or do you either have it or you don't?
Sitting in the draft room, right? Like, I've worked with a lot of people in this building over the 9 years, and I definitely think that trait can be developed. But I also think that there are people that are just naturally better at it than others. We've had guys in that room that when they speak, everyone stops and listens and looks at them, because we all know that they're right more than they're wrong. But it's definitely, like, I think at the end of the day, it's just not being afraid to swing the bat. Either we always talk about the best that ever do it are just right at a healthy clip more than they're wrong. So it's like, you're going to have mistakes. Just kind of speak your truth and see what say what you see.
You're a young man, but almost a decade in the business. Yeah. What's the biggest lesson you've learned so far?
I would say there's a lot of lessons, but I would say that it's all about the people. Whether it be the people that we work with here with the Packers, whether it be the people that I work with as an area scout at respective schools, and then really even just in my calling, like, through the jobs, like, to figure out these people that we potentially are going to bring here. We're all very proud of the people that we work with, the men in that locker room, like the coaches on the coaching staff, like, and so it's like we have to kind of do our part to make sure that the people that we're bringing in are the right kind of people. And I think in years of doing the job, you kind of learn how important that is. And maybe when you're young, you're like, oh, I don't care that this guy has this thing that wouldn't mesh. He can play football, but, like, it does ultimately matter.
Do you have, at this point, a biggest influence on your career to date?
I think it would be hard to isolate, like, a singular person. Obviously, I mentioned Alonzo Highsmith for helping me get here, and I learned so much from him. Like, my first 2 years being in the office, learned a lot from Elliot Wolf, and then Joe Huber was kind of like a mentor to me, because he was had just come in about a year before me, so definitely picking his brain. And then moving out onto the road as a college scout, obviously Brian, John Eric Sullivan, Sam Seal, Patrick Moore. I've learned stuff from everyone in that room, so it'd be hard to say one person.
Have you developed your own, drawing from all these resources, have you developed your own philosophy, kind of your own guiding principles or rules of the road that you follow in your scouting?
Yeah, I think that we all have our own taste, our own, like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? We kind of all have our own opinion of what makes a good football player. I think the thing that I've kind of grown to understand is that, like, not put necessarily, like, things in square holes. Like if you can play, you can play. Whether it fits how I ideally would you like it to look or not. So I would guess say just appreciate what people can do and not so much harp on what they can't in terms of players. And then big picture, I've really just kind of been a college scout. So not necessarily had to make a ton of decisions in that regard, but definitely believe, just like everyone that's probably sat here and had this conversation in draft and develop, building through the draft, and then rewarding your own that achieve, and pay them to be kind of your core pillars of your team.
Would you say success in your business is more a matter of inspiration or perspiration, just grinding?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, like you have to, I talked earlier about kind of like building that Rolodex. Like there's just a certain amount of hours that you just have to put in, because it takes a while to kind of train the eye, and you can't ever really like make a statement without putting in the work. So like if I haven't watched film on you, I can't then just go shoot from the hip and talk about how you are as a player. Like you have to put the work in, and you have to kind of sit down and grind it out.
Inspiration or perspiration,
Yeah.
a certain amount of inspiration.
For sure, and kind of a passion that comes to it. Yeah.
Now, don't be modest. This is about you after all. Do you have what you feel is your strongest attribute as a scout?
I think I'm adaptable, and I think as an area scout, no 2 days are the same. And the second you think you got it figured out, something's going to change up on you, and you're going to have to, be able to think on your feet. And then, I mentioned earlier about people. Like I do think that is a strong suit of mine, but also something I enjoy about it. So I enjoy the fact that every day you're going into another building, and a lot of it really just kind of has to do with your personal relationships at each building, and keeping up with those people.
When you're on the road, Luke, what's your typical day like?
Well, all through the year, like the calendar looks different, but let's just say a fall visit. A typical day, you're gonna check there's a website that kind of states when each teams are practicing and when they're not, when they would like you to come in, touch base with the pro liaison there at the school, and he'll let you know when he wants you to come through. But you're gonna wake up in the morning, you're gonna go to the school, say hello to whoever you need to say hello to, but really kind of at the beginning of the day, a lot of it's gonna be just watching film, and kind of catching up on what this guy has been doing in his game tape for the last 3 or 4 games. And then if a team's an afternoon practice team, probably around lunchtime at some point, you're just going to kind of make the rounds around the building, talk to trainer, strength coach, position coach, basically kind of start to build that character part of the evaluation and learning, like, what is this guy like on a daily basis. Then you're going to walk out of practice, and you're going to be able to see them live, move around, how they interact with their teammates, how they practice, how they compete. So you get that exposure, and then you hop in the car, you drive to the next spot, you sit down in your hotel room, and you type up everything from the day and get ready to kind of do the same thing the next day. So it's a lot of volume, it's a lot of travel, it's a lot of work, but it's all fun. I mean, it's just watching and talking football. It's not hard.
Do you have a most valuable part of the evaluation process? All those things you mentioned, is there a most valuable part that you lean on the most?
I mean, I personally love once the season ends and we get to like all-star games and like kind of some of those winter exposures, because during the fall we try and kind of, we don't want to be a distraction, but in the winter, like you have the ability to interview these prospects, these guys for the upcoming draft, and you actually get to sit down with them, and you can ask them questions that maybe you've come up with after watching their tape and following them for the last few years. But I just think you get a really good idea for who these guys are when you can actually sit down and talk with them, hear their stories, hear what they've gone through. Like, and I just think we can't, as scouts, get enough time with them, and so I like that part of the process.
Does the job require a certain amount or kind of courage? Because it's your opinion that you're getting paid to give. Does that require some courage sometimes?
I think it definitely does. I mean, we talk all the time about the, kind of the common enemy being groupthink. Like never being, you just said it, you're paid to give your opinion, never being afraid to give your opinion, even if it goes against what maybe the room or your boss or your coworker thinks. I think you can do it in a respectful way. But like I said earlier, like I think it all comes back down to the work. And if you know you've done the work, then you have every right to speak and be respected in what you see.
Do you take pride, Luke, in being the boots on the ground? I mean, you're doing the legwork, laying the foundation for all these guys. Do you take pride in that? I mean, this is the lifeblood of the organization, bringing in talent.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely like from a 300-foot view, like there's many parts of this process, but you're right that like this is oftentimes it's kind of an introductory stage, but it's definitely from an information gathering, from you know, sweat equity in terms of driving around and time on task. It definitely does have a big part to play in the process, and I appreciate the role that I'm able to play.
Is there in your line of work, again, new talent is the lifeblood of the organization. That's how the Green Bay Packers get that. Is there, we mentioned the courage, there's pressure, isn't there? Do you feel that pressure?
Yeah, I definitely think there's, I mean, when you're sitting in meetings, I think that like when you're particularly excited about a player and you really like a player, probably everyone already knows that you really like them, but you're almost setting the table for those that haven't watched him. And so I think that you feel pressure to, I mean, not convince others to see it the way you see it, but like just kind of let it be known that like, hey, I really like this player. I think he can help us. And then you hope that other people see it the same way and that we ultimately can find a way to make him a Packer. But I think as an area scout, it's also about players that, you know, don't ultimately end up being here. We kind of set the table, like I said, at meetings, and then from there, we ultimately all together will come up with a decision of who's going to come and join us. But you know, I'm just as excited about a guy that maybe I didn't scout, and if he can help us, that's all that matters.
Now, you've got a lot of experience for a young man in the business. Hopes, dreams, and aspirations, do you let your mind wander a little bit?
This is going to sound cliche, but I try and think like just kind of be where your feet are. This is I mean, it's a results-oriented business, and so I think if you start thinking too far in the future, you're going to kind of lose sight of where you're at. I'm still, will be entering into my third season into this new area, and when you move areas, there's a little bit of a growth, or you're just kind of getting settled period. So I'm still trying to be the best. You know, I like to think of it as like I want to be the best, Southeast scout in the whole league. And then when you go from there, then you worry about the next challenge when it's presented to you.
Do you ever sit back and look at the big picture and say, well, if I were building a team, I would do it this way, or how would you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about how general managers often get put in those roles, right? They're taking over teams that maybe didn't have a whole lot of success, right? I think that the first thing that you would have to do is you have to obviously know that roster pretty well, and I imagine through the interview process you would do a fair amount of studying on it. But I think you just got to kind of figure out through that first year who you think kind of fits the cultural vision of who ultimately could play for you, and kind of see who, from a talent standpoint, who's a good player that you want to build around. But ultimately, like I said earlier, it's all about just kind of acquiring talent, draft and develop, give the young guys opportunities, have a coaching staff that can kind of train them up and see who makes the most out of it. And yeah, I would probably say also probably a little bit of personal bias that shapes this view, but definitely think kind of building through the trenches. I mean, I think if you can't protect the quarterback and you don't have an offensive line, I don't think you have much of a chance. And then vice versa, you got to have those big boys that can get after the quarterback. So I definitely would probably attack those areas first.
Agreed. Not surprisingly. What is draft day like for you?
Draft day?
Or days?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think to a certain extent it's maybe a little anticlimactic compared to what most people would think, in the sense that like the draft board's been closed for a couple days. We've kind of had our, a lot of our last conversations, and we kind of know we've set the board. Really, then kind of at that point, the work's been done. You kind of let it sit. Hopefully, you're picking near the bottom of the first round because we've won a lot of games, and those names kind of start to fall off, and you watch a lot of really good players go. But as you get close to your pick, you probably can look up there and have a general idea, one of these 5 guys it'll probably be. And then Goody will walk around, and if he's got any final questions, he might, come over and tap you on the shoulder and ask you this, that, or the other about a player from your area. And then you kind of, you answer it, and then besides that, you're kind of just sitting and waiting for the next opportunity. And then, like I said, if you can't protect the quarterback and you don't have an offensive line, I don't think you have much of a chance. And then vice versa, you got to have for him to make a decision based off of all the information that we've given him.
We may have covered this in some regard already, but just to kind of boil it down, would you say Luke Benuska is more of a tangibles guy or an intangibles guy?
Once again, I'm gonna kind of split you down the middle here. I think it's both. I mean, I think that like there's a certain level of physical talent that you have to meet to play this game. I mean, we talk all the time about the physics of football. I mean, ultimately, if you got a really big guy that runs really fast running into a small guy that runs slow, we all know how that one's gonna go. So I do think you need to meet a kind of a baseline. But when we're talking about kind of that ballpark and you just are going to swing between the sticks, like I do think the person matters immensely, because if you follow this game, or if you evaluate players, there's countless examples of guys with all the talent in the world that don't have long careers. But it's definitely more art than science in the sense that I'd be lying to you if I told you that I had the key to everyone's success and could identify them. You just kind of want to give yourself the best chance to be successful.
Luke, I look at you guys in the personnel department and I see a team within a team. Mm-hmm. And how important is that in the kind of success you guys have had?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of mutual respect just for, I mean, you take the college scout job, which is obviously what I do. Like, you're kind of off by yourself for upwards of 200 or 220 days a year. You're not at practice here with the team. You're not at games. Like, so it's definitely a sacrifice, and it's taxing both on you and on your loved ones, people in your family and stuff. So I think that that's what you probably see is a mutual respect amongst us because of the work that we do and kind of the sacrifices we make. But it's also we all love football. We're all very competitive. And we all want to win. And so I think, you kind of, everyone rowing in the same direction. I think that's, you got to have everyone that has their priorities in the right place, that's willing to put in the work. And I think we got a staff that does that.
Last thing for you, I see you at practice and stuff. What do you think of this team the Packers are putting together?
I think this is a really good team. We talk all the time about Milt Hendrickson's actually the first one that I've heard put it this way, but like, to never get too, zoomed in on the right now. Like you're kind of chasing a moving target. Like I always laugh when people talk about like team needs, because your need today is probably not going to be your need 3 days from now. So I mean, watching the team right now, it's early. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's having fun. But from a personnel standpoint, like I think we're really talented. I think we have great energy. I like how we're getting after it in practice. And I'm excited to see kind of how it shakes out, but there will definitely be obstacles along the way.
Luke, go get them. Luke Benuska, everybody.